Hey guys, today I'm talking about emergency heat for greenhouses, hoop houses, cold frames, whatever you might have. This will work. It will keep your temperature in that above freezing, and it works really well. And of course, the larger your greenhouse, the more of these you'll need to make. In my case, I have an 18 by 24 greenhouse, and so it might take 3 or possibly 4 to keep the temperature above freezing on the coldest nights of the year. I'm in zone 7A, so we do get some really cold nights in January and February and sometimes early March. So let's go into the greenhouse and I'll show you exactly how to put this together. So guys, I'm doing the first step in creating this fuel system for our temporary greenhouse heater. I don't recommend doing this in a microwave, as parts of the fuel system have metal in them, so I don't think that would be a good idea to microwave. So I'm using a small propane stove and I'm melting the fuel source so I can put it into another container. So the fuel source is vegetable oil and I'm melting it. It's Crisco, this brand, but you can also get vegetable shortening in the plastic containers at the big box store, Walmart, wherever it might be. So you can melt this down and put it into a secondary container, and you're not limited to leaving it in the container, although I have seen some people do that. But there's a danger in the plastic container that you get from Walmart that it actually melts and can catch fire. So what I'm doing is I'm transferring it from its original container, and this appears to be metal on the inside, but it has paper wrapping around the outside, so I don't want to leave it in there. I want to put it into like a glass container, a metal container, or something like a small mason jar where I can do so many hours of burn time and I don't have to worry about it catching fire as I would, since this has some type of paper permanently adhered to the outside. So I just want to make sure that it's the safest way possible to do this. Also, I'm going to recommend that you use a carbon monoxide detector in your greenhouse if it's a large greenhouse, or if you're using this in a basement to keep the temperature above freezing. Make sure you have a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector in that area, because you never know what might happen if something catches fire, and you would really need to know that quickly. So guys, this is a little bit off topic, but I wanted to show you this stove because I actually had to purchase this and have it shipped a couple of years ago from Korea, South Korea. And it is a small butane or propane stove. It is really a nice looking stove. I've seen some others around that don't look near as nice as this one, but this is Dr. Howe's brand, and I recently checked to see if it was available for sale online here, and someone is selling them on uh, Amazon, I believe it was, but I'll put a link if I find it. But it is from South Korea, and you can see the Korean writing right here, but it's really a nice looking stove. The reason I'm mentioning this is that if you ever have an emergency situation where you don't have power, this little stove right here works great. There's other brands you can get, camping stove, but this one really is one of the nicer ones I found. So I just thought I'd mention that. I know this is a little bit off topic. Let's get back to the greenhouse heater. Now, I did say vegetable oil earlier. I meant to say vegetable shortening, and we need to transfer that from the can. You can leave it in this can. This particular can looks like it's metal, but I'm really funny about leaving an open flame anywhere. I would never do this on the Walmart brand of this vegetable shortening because it's all plastic, and I did see where someone had done that and it caught fire and there was some burn marks around the edges. So I would not use the vegetable shortening, I'm sorry, I keep saying that, vegetable shortening Walmart brand that's in a completely plastic tub. I just think that's too dangerous. You can use things like, I had found this old shaker in my pantry, and this is a drink shaker. It would be an excellent container to pour your vegetable shortening in, and take one of your candle wicks and run it through the liquid vegetable oil, put it in there, cut it off about half an inch, quarter of an inch from the top. And so this would make a very safe container. But also this is easily knocked over. So if you have cats or dogs, I wouldn't recommend that. Even though it's going to be inside of another container, bumping up against it, it might fall over easy. A mason jar is less likely to fall over. It's heavy and it's fireproof. So we've got two different sizes here. But I would say something like a mason jar is the ideal thing. So if you decide temperatures rise and you can cut your emergency heater off or your greenhouse heaters off, you can just blow the candle out and put the lid back on it, and you've got a backup the next time cold temperatures come around to your greenhouse. Now, I do want to say there's a lot of people saying this will last for months, like 70, 80 days. It's just not true. That's not going to burn that long, even at 8 hours a day. There's a guy named Bob on Cheap RV Living. He did a test and he wrote down he documented exactly. He burned it for 8 hours a night. It lasted, I believe, for 80 hours. So for 10 days, he was able to use this, but that was only 8 hours a day. If if you were running this in a very cold and you were trying to protect your sensitive, tender plants, you're going to get about 80 hours from one size can of this size. So just remember that it's going to take multiple cans, but you can kind of test that against what it would cost you in power consumption and weigh it out to see what's cheaper. This is not going to make your greenhouse a steamy, tropical environment unless you had 6 or 8 of these going at one time. It might keep it up, but if it prevents anything from getting below 32, that's my goal, because I don't have a lot of tropicals, I don't have a lot of succulents, and I've got a secondary area on my greenhouse that's more like a finished metal building. And then even beyond that, I have an insulated small room where I work in the wintertime on bonsai. So if it comes to worse, I can move them into a second and third area if we get some really, really cold temperatures. So just remember, this is not a 2-month solution for your greenhouse. It might be 10 days, go out at night, light it, then put it out the next day as the sun comes out and warms your greenhouse up. Okay guys, I'm going to use a very thick pair of leather gloves, and I'm going to try to carefully ladle this out into our mason jars. I'm going to just do that very slowly. I can tell you that if you get some hot grease on you, you're going to regret it. If you've ever been splattered by grease, it's something you don't want to happen. So I'm just going to carefully do this a little at a time until we get our mason jar filled. I do have a little bit of dripping, but that's to be expected. It's not a perfect science. Also, I'm going to take a pair of vice grips and pick it up and try to do that, but I just want to get as much as I can into my first mason jar that we're going to use as our first candle. And it's still very hot, so just be very careful. Okay, if you don't have a ladle handy, you can also use a pair of vice grips, but again, be very careful. Make sure your vice grips have a good grip on the container. Make sure it locks into place. Now you know you don't have to worry about it coming off, and you're just going to carefully fill your mason jar or whatever container you're using, glass or metal. And so you can see that this large container has filled one large mason jar and 2 smaller mason jars. Now, this looks like metal inside this can, but I don't believe it is. I think it's more like an aluminum foil wrapped in paper. So again, this is the Crisco brand. The Walmart brand is just a plastic tub that's likely to melt or catch fire. So I would stick with glass or metal to burn your candle in. All right, so I'm going to use 2 candle wicks per mason jar, and I don't think 1 is enough. I think they have a tendency to go out, so I'll check this a little later, make sure that they're in the center, or I can use a piece of tape to make sure it doesn't fall to one side. We want the candle wicks to be right in the center, and also we want them to be straight, so we may have to use a little bit of tape to get them right where we want them. But again, just 2 candle wicks. Now, if you're going to use a larger container like the original container that the vegetable shortening came in, you want to put 3 into that one because it's such a large container and you want it to keep burning. They're more likely to go out if you don't have 2 or 3 wicks in each one. I'm going to put some tape on these and make sure they're standing straight up and down. This will cool overnight, and then I can test it in my terracotta heater, metal heater, or tin pail heater, excuse me. So guys, I'm going to use tape and some of my barbecue skewers to kind of make sure that these stay right in the center. As this cools, I'll probably have to come back a couple of times while it's cooling and just straighten up the wick. So just remember, it's a slow process for this to turn back to a solid, and that might take several hours to happen. Now, everyone's talking about terracotta as your heater, but there's some other things you can use too. Like for instance, I found this old bait bucket around some old fishing supplies, and you could do this as well. Put your candle inside, close the lid, and there's enough holes in the side to draw air in, and this top will heat up really hot, so you might have that same effect. Maybe not as good as terracotta, but you kind of get creative with the metal containers around your property. And if you search through your basement and find some old junk like this, as long as there's no flammable components to it. Now, another thing, I have an old dog food pail, and this could be drilled out in the top, flipped upside down. Use some terracotta feet to make sure, I'll try to demonstrate that, to make sure there's oxygen intake. And then that way, so you want to make sure there's enough oxygen going into the bottom. Cut your hole in the top so that the smoke can escape, or soot, whatever might be inside. You don't want to build up of carbon dioxide in there or smoke. That would be a problem. But something like this with a hole cut in the top is kind of the same effect as the terracotta, and this pail can heat up maybe even better. You'd have to do some testing, and that's what my heat gun is for. In the next few days, I'm going to do testing on all 3 of these and put them into a YouTube short, so keep an eye out for that. But let's move on to the terracotta system. Okay guys, the way this is going to work, you would put your vegetable shortening candle in the center. You're going to use some of these terracotta feet to use it as a way for oxygen to get inside of the container, and you just have to kind of work with what you have. So if you don't have terracotta feet, you could use something like a stones or something like that. But you're going to place the candle in the center and then use a large terracotta pot right around the edge. Now, after some careful rearranging, the terracotta feet I think are in place. We have a place for oxygen intake in the bottom. Our candle will be inside of the terracotta pot heating up the terracotta. You want to make sure that you're really careful around pets. If you have a dog that bumps into things a lot and he goes into your greenhouse, make sure you don't allow him access to this. You want to kind of protect it from any animal, pet that might cause a problem. You're going to put your second largest terracotta pot on that. Go to your third, and then your final terracotta pot. Now each one of these pots have holes in it to allow gases to escape. You don't want a gas buildup inside of here with carbon dioxide, but that's the way you're going to assemble the terracotta heater. And I'm going to go through different methods over the next few days and do some studying on exactly which one puts out the most heat. Okay guys, so I'm doing the same test with our bait bucket, and you can see metal also heats up quite quickly with our candles inside. It's cooling off because I'm bouncing around, but that gives you an idea of over 200 degrees. Okay guys, I'm testing this now on our metal pail, and you can see it's only been in there for a few minutes and it's already starting to heat up quite nicely. So guys, whether you want to use terracotta, if you have some old terracotta pots around, or you have an old metal pail, or even something as unusual as a bait bucket, things like this, you can just be creative. Just the thing to remember is you don't want anything that's flammable, but this will work if you use just simple vegetable shortening. It works every time, and it's very low cost. So to heat my greenhouse might take 4 or even 5 of these if I wanted to keep it above freezing on the coldest days of the year. I do, however, use another type of heater. I'm going to show you that, and it's thermostat controlled. So guys, this is my primary greenhouse heater, and it's thermostat controlled, and also it has tip over protection, so if it was to fall over, it will automatically shut off, so I don't have to worry about a tragedy happening with my greenhouse, because I'm only building one of these in my lifetime. So anyways, I'll link this below if you decide you want to try this along with the other products that in the video. And I think that when it comes to my greenhouse, I'm not so much worried about getting below freezing. I just want to keep it from getting to an extremely cold temperature, because this greenhouse is primarily used for bonsai in the wintertime, just to keep the root balls from freezing completely. So I do bring those in the coldest 3 months of the year and then take them outside. They can survive no problem with freezing temperatures. But I do have some succulents, some aloe vera and other plants, citrus plants, that I want to protect from extremely cold weather. I can always put them closer to the heater to make sure that they don't have frozen or frost damage. So guys, what got me to thinking about this is we're at the end of October and we're expecting our first nights with frost coming up in just a few days. And it's a little bit early this year. We usually get our frost a little bit later into November. But if you need to heat a cold frame or a small greenhouse, the shortening candles will do great for you. And if you don't have electricity, it's even better, because you don't have to worry about not being able to keep your plants alive. Hey guys, I really appreciate you watching, and I hope if you got something out of the video, I hope you'll like and subscribe. Also, if you have anything to add or any comments, I hope you'll leave those down below. If I left something out or I misstated something, which I often do, please leave that information in the comment section. So guys, have a great day.